Hello, and welcome to myfinanceteacher.org. Let's talk about cryptos today. More specifically, let's have a quick look at Bitcoin and Ethereum. Over the last several weeks, over the last couple of months, Bitcoin has actually been doing quite well. And to be honest, in one of my previous videos on Bitcoin, that was about a week ago, as you see from this arrow, I did expect a decline in Bitcoin to continue all the way down to possibly 7,500. That actually didn't happen. But at the moment, I do think Bitcoin is getting a little bit stretched to the upside, and we might see a correction over the next 1 or 2 weeks. Before we start talking about the outlook for Bitcoin and Ethereum, a quick reminder to you if you are watching this on YouTube. These videos on YouTube are significantly delayed. If you want to have timely updates that might be helpful for your trading decisions, although remember, this is not investment advice. In either case, if you want to have timely updates, join us at myfinanceteacher.org. As you see here, yesterday we had a quick chat about the general stock markets. We mentioned that here on Thursday we might have seen the short-term daily cycle low finally finish. That video actually came out before the markets opened, and the markets opened with a gap up, giving us more confidence for a trade that we executed on Monday morning. The gains since then are not dramatic, but we'll probably still have a couple of weeks ahead of us for some potential gains. So for more timely details on trades like this, join us at myfinanceteacher.org. Jumping back to Bitcoin, over a week ago over here on 10th of May, Bitcoin did drop quite considerably. That was actually a 19% drop, which retested the 200-day moving average. So one actually might be able to argue that we've seen the 2-month cycle finish in Bitcoin here between the middle of March and the 10th of May, in which case the new 2-month cycle is still young and we might expect a continued uptrend over the next several weeks. However, I'm not convinced that the drop into the 10th of March was significant enough to give us the end of that 2-month cycle in Bitcoin. Yes, we did retest the 200-day moving average, which can act as a respectable support zone, but we've only dropped slightly below the middle of the Bollinger Bands, and I would like to see price oscillate back to the lower range of the Bollinger Bands at the time when it's reaching a 2-month cycle low. Secondly, the price was still over 8% above the 50-day moving average, and historically these 2-month cycle lows actually happened below that 50-day moving average, with only one exception in 2019 and no exceptions in 2018. Thirdly, RSI at that time only dipped down to 48.47, and that is 10-day RSI. It should be a little bit more volatile as opposed to 14-day RSI. So even a more volatile 10-day RSI only dipped down to 48.47, and for a 2-month cycle low in Bitcoin, I'd probably like to see it at least come close to 40. Fourthly, if we haven't seen the 2-month cycle low in Bitcoin finish here on the 10th of May, then we are still on day 67 of an ongoing 2-month cycle in Bitcoin, and it's not impossible for a cycle to stretch, say, to about 80 days, and maybe finally give us a cycle low in Bitcoin over the next 1 or 2 weeks, maybe retest that support zone at 7,500. Historically, over the last 3 years or so, these 2-month cycles in Bitcoins average about 64 days, and the longest over the last few years lasted for 97 days. So based on the duration of these cycles, it's still possible to see a cycle low over the next 1 or 2 weeks. And the fifth reason why I think we might see a cycle low sometime soon are these transactions on Bitcoin at the moment. Usually at the cycle tops, the transactions are also pretty high. Looking at this middle of February, for example, we have a local top on the fees per Bitcoin transaction. And looking at the price chart, we see that in the middle of February, we did actually see a cycle top as well. There's another top over here on the 20th of March. And although we don't see a cycle top on the 20th of March, bouncing out of this very cheap $4,000 Bitcoins all the way up above $5,000, that might actually attract some buyers, increasing the number of transactions and the fees. But looking back over a year, consider this other local top at the end of October, early November, we see that there's another cycle top, which is again at the end of October, early November. Looking at another one over here in early August 2019, again we see a cycle top at the same time on the price chart. And of course, late June, early July, that's when Bitcoin was testing 14,000 at that midsummer cycle top. And looking at what's happening to transactions at the moment, the transaction fees are actually nearly as high as they were back in the middle of summer last year when Bitcoin was stretched quite a lot on the upside. So that is the fifth reason why I think we're a little bit overstretched and Bitcoin is probably due for some cool-off period over the next couple of weeks. Zooming into the 4-hour chart on Bitcoin, we see that over the last few days, Bitcoin oscillated from the lower range of the Bollinger Bands, poked through the upper range several times, came back towards the lower range of the Bollinger Bands, oscillated back up, poking through the upper range 3 times. It's now in the process of retesting that lower range again. And as the Bollinger Bands narrow, we might see some significant volatility in Bitcoin, as volatile moves usually happen when Bollinger Bands are narrow. Given the 5 reasons that I've just mentioned, I think the volatility to the downside is a little bit more likely than volatility to the upside. So over the next few days, I think one should be relatively cautious on Bitcoin. On the other hand, if Bitcoin breaks this resistance zone at, say, around $10,000, which it has been knocking on for a few times over the last couple of weeks, then you could say that Bitcoin would break out of this ascending triangle, with the height of the triangle telling us something about the measured target for that breakout, and with the height being $1,800, if Bitcoin breaks to the upside of this triangle, it might retest $12,000, although this is not my primary scenario. I think it's more likely that Bitcoin will break to the downside from this triangle, although ascending triangles are usually broken to the upside. I think this is likely to be an exception this time. If over the next couple of days we see Bitcoin below, say, $9,400, it's likely Bitcoin is going to retest the lower range of the Bollinger Bands or these 250-day moving averages somewhere at $8,000. Or even this lower support zone formed by early April highs at about $7,500. I would give this scenario, say, 65% chance and only about 35% chance of a breakout to the upside. In either case, though, at the moment I'm not holding short-term positions in Bitcoin, although I do hold my long-term hodl position all the time. In either case, whatever happens to the breakout, I'm going to make timely updates at myfinancesteacher.org, and if the breakout happens to the upside, there might be an interesting trading strategy with clear stop losses and targets. So stay tuned for that and join us at myfinancesteacher.org. Next, let's have a quick look at Ethereum. Although Ethereum and Bitcoin do often move together, this is Ethereum versus the US dollar, it looks like these cycles in Ethereum are a little bit shorter than 2-month cycles in Bitcoin. Over the last year or so, these cycles in Ethereum lasted for around 51 days. So the local low here on the 11th of May, I think, is our cycle low for Ethereum. Unlike Bitcoin, it did actually retest and even poked once through the lower range of the Bollinger Bands. And this 10-day RSI did dip slightly below 40. Ethereum actually gave us 22% decline, so that might be deep enough for a cycle low in Ethereum. However, I think you still should be a little bit cautious with Ethereum at the moment, because if we see Bitcoin decline over the next couple of weeks, it might drag other cryptocurrencies down with it. And if that decline happens, I expect it to be a short-term affair followed by a profitable rally. So we have to keep our eyes open for that. And with your eyes open, if you notice anything interesting on the charts, let me know in the comments below. Hit that like button as well. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and good luck in your trades.